Okay, so this is now live on the feed, and it is 8 o'clock on the 31st of January, Wednesday evening. So if you're joining me live, thanks for doing so. If you're consuming this at some point in the future, then again, thanks for stopping by. The topic this evening, and I have got some slides to share in a moment, is how to measure value creation and how to effectively validate your profit engine. So the reason I've come up with this title and the reason I want to talk about this is because I've been in business for 25 years or so. I've been involved in running companies, and now in a business advisory capacity and in a fractional capacity, when I engage with companies for the first time, often business owners want to talk about profit and growth and managing risk and controlling cost and those sorts of things. But I want to get a good idea of what's at the heart of the business and what's actually creating the value. And in the roles I've done in the past, I've run sales teams and we've been out on the road and I've had thousands of interactions with customers where you're solving problems for people and you're selling products and services and often at a premium. And so you really need to understand what the value is that's embedded in those things and what value customers attach to those things and how they make buying decisions. And I think once you get into that mindset of value creation and how do you create value, it kind of turns on its head to some degree how you choose to manage your business and how you interact with the various stakeholders around the business as well. So I don't think every business owner looks at it that way, and this is why people's ears prick up when we talk about profit and talk about growth and those sorts of things. But actually, value creation is sort of upstream of that, and so I wanted to unpick that and just to give you my take on it. So this is a take based on business education, but sort of 25 years in the trenches, selling in commercial roles and sort of managing director and executive roles as well. I can't see who's with me, but if you want to comment, you can do so on the thread, and I'll see comments as well, so I can pick up on things as we go. But otherwise, you're going to be on my profile if you're watching this, so you know where I am if you want to DM me with anything. So I'm going to share some slides here. The last time I spoke about or did a live feed like this, I talked about niching versus generalists in terms of business strategies and what the compromises are and what the things are that you need to consider if you're going to niche down on something. And the reason that I kind of came up with that one and the reason I followed on with this one is this as a backdrop. And this is government information about the age of businesses in the UK. So this is kind of UK centric. I imagine it would convert to other parts of the world as well. But this is the average age of businesses in the UK. So this is a breakdown. It's quite a small graph, but the longest bar on that graph there is businesses between 1 and 4 years of age. And then as time goes on, as you drop down through the age brackets there, the proportion of businesses that exist just drops away. So what this is telling us is that businesses kind of come in, there's a lot of new businesses created, they burn bright for a short while and then they fade away. And businesses that are actually in it for the long term are very rare. Once you get to sort of 10 years, you're talking about sort of 3/4 of businesses don't get to 10 years. And beyond that, it just drops away and drops away and drops away. So you maybe shouldn't take a lead on how to run businesses from the people who are running businesses around you, unless they've been doing it for a long time very successfully, because the vast majority won't be successful long term. And I think that's quite sobering to sort of see those sort of statistics. And this is government information. This is 2022. 2023 will be much the same. Obviously, these are slow to change as you feed new businesses into the system, and you've got 5.5 million businesses there. So what it means is that only 4 in 10 businesses actually make it to 3 years, and only 3 in 10 businesses make it to 10 years. Less than 1 in 10 make it to 20, and the average age of a business in the UK is therefore 8.5 years. And that's a proxy, therefore, for the life expectancy of a business as well. So that being the case, it says to me that maybe people have a good concept to start with, and they're not able to adapt, and they're not able to then sort of take that forward. And business is all about creating value, which I'll talk about in a moment, and I'll sort of unpick what I think that means and how I would like to measure it, and sort of the nuances that are around it, and how I think it's important when running a business. So that brings you back to this horrible sort of statistic and the shape of this graph. If every business was successful, it would sort of be loaded out at the bottom there, and businesses would all be 50 years old and beyond, and they've been around for a long time. But that's just not the way that the world works. So what do they die of? Well, again, I said last time, if you look at sort of post-mortems and you read the trade press and you go looking for reasons of why businesses are no longer operating, you get all sorts of reasons: lack of leadership, company culture, impractical partnerships, competitive success, etc. And I would question all of these things, really. I would say that these are all within control of the business, and these are all sort of effects of something else that's not right. And the good news is, and there is good news in this message that I'm giving, which is quite stark, and the good news is that these are all within the gift of control of a company. So you can put a good leadership structure in place. You can plan correctly. You can instill a positive company culture. You can grow sustainably if you plan for it properly. You can have practical partnerships. All of these things are within the control of a business. So I would argue then that businesses actually go out of business and they're either dissolved or liquidated, or ultimately don't deliver on what they're designed to deliver and don't meet sort of fulfill their potential, is about their inability to adapt. And that means, and it does come back to value, that they've created value, but they're unable to then to continue to do so as the market changes and the environment that they're operating in changes. And it would seem that that is something which is a very common problem. So it's not adaptation, it's the lack thereof of adaptation that causes businesses to fail. So that's really the sort of backdrop to what I want to talk about this evening. And when I speak to companies and how I position my services, is I talk about profit and growth, and I talk about managing risk and managing cost. And the reason I do that is because I know that those are things which cause business owners to prick their ears up. These are areas of interest, and they're things that shareholders want to talk about. They're things that accountants want to talk about. They are proxies for successful businesses, or indicators of successful businesses if you can do these things right. But it doesn't tell me, under everything else, what this business actually has to offer. And if I go into a sector that I'm not familiar with, I'm from an engineering background, but if I go into a sector that isn't doing something that I'm familiar with, and I have the luxury of being able to ask sort of silly questions, if you like, I want to understand, and I'd like to think that most investors would want to understand this as well, is that behind the website and behind all the branding and the social media and the clever language and all the other stuff, is there some diamond in the center of this business where it creates something really valuable that it can then monetize? And is it quite marginal, or is it something really very exciting? And there's not really a lot of good measures for that sort of thing. But when you think about it, that's completely upstream of these things. If you create value, then you have an opportunity to make profit. If you create value, then you probably have an opportunity to take market share and to grow. And if you create value, you have a business which you can then manage the risk and the cost within. Without the value upstream of this, these things are all just they're just secondary. So yes, it's very important to manage profit and growth and risk and cost and everything else. But for me, I just want to sense check when I first deal with a new company: is what is it you're dealing with here? Do you understand what you're dealing with? Do you know how to communicate it? And do you know how to leverage it properly and actually take it forward? And surprisingly, there are businesses that don't sort of have a good handle on that. And when you look at accounting measures, there's return on capital employed. You can do discounted cash flow models and net present value of future cash flows, and try and work out all these sort of indicators of value. But I just, as a simple human being, want to be able to have some better sort of intuitive measure. And there's some things you just cannot measure in numbers, but that are very important in terms of value creation that I'll talk about now. So when I say value creation, it almost feels like kind of alchemy, where you're taking some components, some things, some resources that you have, and you're putting them together in such a way that it's worth more to somebody else than the sum of the parts you've collected together. So whether that is literally physical parts that you build into a piece of machinery or a vehicle or a device of some sort that has intrinsic value then that is more than it costs you to put it together. And that value creation, as far as I see, and through my travels and all the interactions I've had with customers, kind of breaks down into a couple of areas. One is measurable monetary outcomes. So actually understanding what it can deliver in monetary terms. And that does actually break down into a number of different sort of monetary benefits I'll talk about in a moment. So the measurable stuff, the pounds and the pence of what does it cost to make, what does it cost to create, and what benefit does it give to a customer, which I can actually communicate in a monetary sense. And is it quite marginal? Is it, I've got to spend £1 to make something which is worth £1.05 to somebody? Or is it something whereby I can make something for £1 and it's worth £10 to somebody in terms of money saved or money created or opportunities opened up? Because the bigger that divide, the more opportunity is there, therefore, to transfer value to clients, and also to lock in profit for the company as well. And then there's the emotional outcomes as well. There's value that's attached to emotional experiences that people have, and that's very difficult to quantify because people pay different amounts of money for different experiences, if you like, emotional experiences, depending on their values. But the emotional side of it is very much a driver as well, and the two are kind of interconnected and can't really be separated in my experience. So if we look at the monetary side, first of all, there's different ways of being able to say to somebody, I've got something for you and it's going to financially be good for you. And the first one that I see is a product or a service which actually saves money in the future. And this would be things like avoiding some form of loss, for example. So something which creates efficiencies or durability. Maybe it's compliance with regulations, or it's safety or security, something like that. So in essence, it's basically saying, this will last longer, so therefore you can defer the cost. There's less cost in the future. It saves you money on repairs, or it saves you money on being prosecuted for failing to comply with regulations, or to avoid an accident, or to avoid theft, or something like that. So it's about being able to say, you spend this, but you potentially get this saving. And the stronger the evidence that saving is locked in, then the more compelling that monetary message will be. And that might be something like, this is just an example, but like a thermostat, for example, where a smart thermostat that will actually sort of read your behaviors and learn your behaviors and then save you money in the future. And you may be able to say, okay, I don't own a Nest thermostat, so I don't know what the price of this is, but say, for example, it's £100, but you can confidently demonstrate to customers that this is going to save them £1,000 in their heating and cooling costs over the course of 4 years, whatever it may be. You've got like a 10-to-1 ratio there that you can play with in terms of communicating value and a benefit, monetary benefit. And you'd have to try and build some certainty around those figures and make sure those figures are robust to be able to communicate a monetary saving. So the first one is about selling them something, selling a product or service which is actually creating a future benefit, but it's not putting money into people's pockets. Well, it is, but it's doing so by saving them money, not by generating money for them. And I find that emotionally people are more attached to the idea of actually generating money than they are to maybe saving money. There's slightly different emotional response to those two different types. So the second one would be the ability to actually create money for somebody rather than saving them something in the future. If you can actually give them something which would allow them to generate money themselves, then that can be quite a compelling offer and a compelling demonstration of monetary value. So I'm talking about teaching a skill, bolting on a competence, or opening up new sales avenues or opportunities, or that sort of thing. So quite different from an insurance policy or something that's going to cover you from some potential loss, but nevertheless a value as well. So that might be something like online courses, learning, giving somebody the ability to fish and go and catch fish themselves, if you like. And then you should be able to, depending on what you're teaching them, be able to quantify what sort of financial benefit that will bring them over a period of time and build that into the argumentation, or maybe I don't like the term argumentation, but communicating the value that will then provide for them based on the initial spend. And the third one that I can see would be actual creation of money. And I think this is a little bit more commoditized sort of space, but it sounds amazing. So you sell somebody something and then they're able to turn that into something immediately, which is of greater value. So what I mean there is it's kind of more sort of merchanting. So buy this thing, sell it on at a premium. So that might be wholesaling, for example, and wholesalers will sell to somebody, they will mark it up and they'll sell it on. So they'll know, if I can buy it for X, I can mark it up and I can sell it for Y. And it's about the distribution network, which allows them to sort of break it down and sell it retail. So that is a straight step up in value, and they can see that monetary step up. I put Salesforce in here, so things like CRM tools and sales tools, where you sell a piece of software and that immediately enables a company to go and then generate sales potentially in a short turnaround. So maybe this should belong in the second example, but it's kind of borderline. I think maybe it belongs in this third example, where they can use that immediately to then go and create money for themselves, and therefore there's kind of that immediate sort of connection between the cost to you as a company, which obviously you keep to yourself, the cost to the customer, and then the benefit and the monetary benefit that's attached to that transaction. But then, of course, there's the emotional value as well. So the monetary value is one side of things, but that's based purely on logic. And you'd like to think that we all think like an accountant, and we can say, okay, well, if I'm going to save £1,000 over 4 or 5 years with this magic thermostat, then it's a no-brainer that I would spend the money up front as long as I have that money available. But not everybody, has that thought process, and not everybody acts logically based on the monetary value that you're able to create, which is why there are many good ideas out there and many good solutions that we've seen that never make it, because they're just not able to switch on that emotional trigger that people have and attach themselves to an emotional response in customers, which means that people recognize the value. And when I talk about value, emotional value indicators, I'm talking about things like benefits such as style or social status, entertainment, comfort, convenience, wellness, reduction in stress, for example. So these are things I mentioned before. I said it's difficult to put a number on these because somebody will pay a lot more money for social status than somebody else. It depends really on their values. So whether they're paying for style or for comfort, for wellness, it comes down to people's personal preference. But there is most certainly a value attached to those things. And every purchase that people make will have an emotional, whether it's a loaf of bread, it's easy if you're buying, something like a car, but if you're buying, everyday things, but you might still be thinking about the health benefits of that, or what it will be like and what it will taste like. And there's all things that will play into an emotional response, which will sit alongside a sort of monetary consideration. So it is very much part of the value piece as I see it. And I've had situations where I've been able to demonstrate monetary benefit to prospective clients in the past who haven't bought because they haven't been taken on that emotional journey. So even though logic says they would be a no-brainer, there's something else on the emotional side that would hold them back. And people buy with emotion and they justify it with logic. And I'm sure you've heard that phrase before. So people will look at things, they will think that they're making a logical decision, but actually they're making decisions based on the emotional triggers that are there, and then they're using the logic to justify the decision later. So, for example, you might want to go and buy an electric car, and you might say to yourself, well, this is kind of economically, this is the right thing to do, and it kind of stacks up, and we've done the calculations, and it's practical, and it's something that we should do. But there's this part of you as well that's thinking, wow, what will the neighbours think when they see this? And what would it feel like to drive this? And look what it looks like. And, you're kind of excited about the emotional side. So you might make the decision based on what it looks like and the aesthetics and those other things. And then you justify it on the consumption and the energy and the environmental benefit. And you kind of, you game yourself, if you like, on the logic. You use the logic to justify your emotional desires. So if you're a business owner and you're trying to sell to people, then it's very important that you understand both the monetary side of it and the logical side of it, and also the emotional triggers at the same time. I'm sure I'm teaching you to suck eggs here, but and by way of proof that people don't make decisions based on logic alone, there's all sorts of systems and processes and entrenched cultural norms that exist around things which don't make a lot of sense to us anymore. And the keyboard is one example. I put it in a post recently, but the format of a QWERTY keyboard, which we all use, was developed in the 1870s on traditional typewriters because it's trying to avoid having letters which would be stamped immediately one after the other, because it tends to cause the keys to jam. Now, obviously, we don't tend to use traditional typewriters anymore, and it's been modelled many times now on new keyboard formats, which would speed up the typing process. And if you imagine speeding up typing for, however many billion people actually use keyboards and type every day, there's huge logical benefits that could be locked in. But because the norms are that we do it this way, and we haven't really got an emotional response attached to the benefits of changing, these things just haven't stuck, and we haven't made those changes. And that's all around us, where you can see good, logical, valuable monetary benefits that never get any traction because they just haven't managed to get the emotional response triggered at the same time. So things to understand and leverage in your own business to take advantage of these ideas, and the things that I've sort of taken away from my experiences in business would be that you really need to understand what the value creators are that your solution touches upon, and what the monetary value is behind those. So is it a very potent monetary solution? Because if it is, then you're in a good place potentially, notwithstanding competition and what's going on in your particular field. But if you can take £1 and you can turn it into £10 for somebody, either in a saved cost or in a future benefit, and you can demonstrate that reliably and with a sort of good link and good logic, then that puts you in a good position as long as you're able to communicate that and you understand it. But also, what are the emotional value triggers, and how does that factor into the business as well? What do you touch upon? And this all needs to be validated, by the way. Many a time I've seen product development go on sort of behind closed doors, and you assume that you're going to take a huge benefit out to customers. And I know I've been involved in sort of rolling products out at the front end, at the pointy end, where you're having customer interactions, and they have a different view of the world in terms of what their costs are, and some of the assumptions that are made on the monetary side, but also on the emotional side as well. You've got to test these things and make sure that in the real world that you understand what the emotional triggers are, and they're validated, not just in a sort of within the four walls of your business, but actually out in the real world. So understanding the true monetary benefits, understanding the value triggers from an emotional point of view is very important. And you'd be amazed how many businesses don't really have a good handle on that. And then finally, as well, there is the building of social capital in your business. Because I think once you start thinking about value creation rather than just how do we make money, how do we make profit and control our costs, it starts to create an environment which is much more supportive of business. So what I mean by social capital is trying to think about a holistic approach to business where everybody wins. And if you can do that, if you can think about your suppliers and the people in your value chain, you can think about customers, you can think about the internal stakeholders within your company, the employees, and anybody else in the ecosystem of your business, and actually think about it in terms of how can I create value that helps everybody in this environment. And again, you'd be amazed. I've sat in board meetings at a very senior level, and very rarely is it touched on this when we're thinking about ways to actually win and create sort of success for shareholders, is thinking about how do we actually help our suppliers to win? How do we help our customers to win? How do we help the internal employee structure to win here? And in so doing, create an environment where people are very then open to collaboration. So this is things like working with your supply chain, bringing them into the fold, giving them access to your resources, partnering with things, identifying opportunities for groups through your own network, just finding ways that actually create wins for other people within the network and the stakeholders. Because I can guarantee that if you present a solution to two parties and it's got the same monetary benefits and it triggers the same emotional response, but one of them also comes with a lot of goodwill from all of the deposits you've made, if you like, into your and the social capital you've built in your network, the response there will be very different to one where you're not known or where you haven't made those deposits. So I think just thinking about a business from the very fundamentals and saying, how do we create value? And knowing that everything else flows from there changes the way that you sort of probably build out a strategy and think about your suppliers and think about everybody in the ecosystem, rather than just, I think we can make this much profit, we've got a solution, let's just go and crack the whip and see how far we go. So I think it's a really important piece, and which is why I've kind of dedicated half an hour to talk purely about value and value creation. So I work in the field of profit and growth and cost and all the things I've just talked about, not saying that they're not important. And if you are interested in managing your risk and managing costs and growing your business and growing profit, then I'd absolutely love to talk to you. I think it's a good idea to use business advisors and fractional executives to bounce ideas off and to give expert input in those areas. But also, if you're looking to create win-wins, then that is what I'm looking to do with my clients and prospective clients as well. So again, if you're in that mindset and this resonates with you in terms of creating value and understanding that win-wins actually create better outcomes than the sort of siloed effect that business normally has, then again, I'd be very interested to speak to you. I don't know how long I've been talking for, probably about 25 minutes or so. So I'm going to leave it there. It's sitting there for perpetuity on the thread. So if you want to contact me, you're on my profile, so you can email me and message me anytime. But otherwise, that's all I had to say about value creation. Thanks very much.